In 2002, the Women's Health Initiative, one of the largest clinical trials in history, published results showing that the synthetic hormone replacement therapy that millions of menopausal women had been prescribed for decades significantly increased the risk of breast cancer, heart disease, and stroke. The pharmaceutical industry had been prescribing Premarin and Prempro, synthetic HERT, since the 1960s. By the late 1990s, it was one of the most prescribed medications in the United States, generating billions of dollars annually. The Y results were devastating. Prescriptions collapsed overnight. Millions of women were left without the treatment their doctors had told them was the gold standard. And into this vacuum, this enormous medical need, suddenly abandoned by the pharmaceutical solution, there should have stepped the plant that traditional European and Asian medicine had used for hormonal balance for 6,000 years. There should have. But by 2002, most women had never heard of it. Their doctors hadn't mentioned it. The medical education system hadn't included it. There was no pharmaceutical sales force promoting it. The plant is red clover, and I want to tell you its story. Stay until the very end. Red clover, Trifolium pratense, is one of the most familiar plants in the Northern Hemisphere. It grows in meadows, lawns, and roadsides. Children pick it and suck nectar from the florets. Bees make honey from it. Farmers grow it as a nitrogen-fixing cover crop. It has been cultivated in Europe for at least 2,000 years as an agricultural plant. Its medicinal use is older. European herbalists of the 16th and 17th centuries documented red clover for skin conditions, respiratory problems, and, significantly, for conditions associated with hormonal fluctuation in women. Terms like woman's complaint and change of life appear in early modern European herbals alongside red clover preparations. In traditional Chinese medicine, the isoflavone-rich herbs, plants containing plant estrogens including red clover and its relatives, have been used for menopausal symptoms for at least 2,000 years. The pharmacological basis for this traditional use was identified in the 1940s, when Australian sheep farmers noticed that ewes grazing heavily on red clover pastures were experiencing fertility problems and reproductive anomalies. Investigating the cause led researchers to discover isoflavones, plant compounds with structural similarity to estrogen that can bind to estrogen receptors in mammals. This discovery was initially treated as an agricultural problem. It took several more decades before researchers began to seriously investigate whether the same compounds that caused estrogen-like effects in sheep might have therapeutic applications in women experiencing estrogen decline during menopause. By the 1980s, epidemiological studies were noting that women in traditional Asian diets, which are high in soy and legume-based foods, rich in isoflavones, experienced dramatically lower rates of menopausal hot flashes, osteoporosis, and certain hormone-sensitive cancers compared to women on Western diets. Red clover contains 4 primary isoflavones: biocanin A, formonetin, didzane, and genistein. This isoflavone profile is more diverse and in some studies more therapeutically active than soy isoflavones. Isoflavones are phytoestrogens. They bind to estrogen receptors but with lower affinity than endogenous estrogen, producing a modulating rather than replacing effect. They act as partial agonists, which means they can both activate and block estrogen receptors depending on the tissue and the hormonal context. This tissue selective activity is clinically significant. In theory, and in multiple studies in practice, this means red clover isoflavones can reduce menopausal symptoms without the indiscriminate estrogenic stimulation associated with synthetic HERT. Clinical evidence for menopausal symptoms. A 2007 meta-analysis published in the journal Macharitas reviewed randomized controlled trials of red clover isoflavones for hot flashes and found statistically significant reduction in hot flash frequency and severity compared to placebo. A reduction of approximately 44% in some studies. A 2004 randomized controlled trial published in Gynecological Endocrinology found that red clover isoflavones improved hot flash frequency, vaginal dryness, and mood parameters in menopausal women. Bone health. Multiple studies have examined isoflavones for bone density preservation, one of the critical concerns in postmenopausal women, and the primary rationale for conventional HERT beyond symptom management. Results show modest but meaningful preservation of bone mineral density in women taking red clover isoflavones, with several studies showing statistically significant effects on lumbar spine density. Cardiovascular effects. Estrogen decline in menopause is associated with deteriorating cardiovascular risk profiles. Studies on red clover isoflavones have found improvements in arterial elasticity, HDL cholesterol, and other cardiovascular markers, addressing one of the primary mechanisms by which menopause increases cardiovascular risk. And critically, unlike synthetic heart, multiple studies have found no stimulatory effect of red clover isoflavones on breast tissue density, a key marker of breast cancer risk. The story of synthetic HERT is one of the most instructive in modern pharmaceutical history. Premarin, conjugated equine estrogen, derived from pregnant mare's urine, was approved in 1942 and became the first blockbuster pharmaceutical product for menopause. Its commercial success was built not primarily on clinical evidence, but on aggressive pharmaceutical marketing that redefined menopause as an estrogen deficiency disease rather than a normal life transition. Robert Wilson's 1966 book Feminine Forever, largely funded by pharmaceutical companies, promoted the idea that menopause was a disease of estrogen deficiency and that HERT could keep women permanently young. The book was a bestseller. Premarin prescriptions skyrocketed. For 4 decades, synthetic HERT was promoted as a solution to hot flashes, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and aging itself. By 2001, Premarin was the most prescribed drug in the United States. The Women's Health Initiative results in 2002 showed that long-term combined HERT significantly increased the risk of breast cancer, cardiovascular events, and stroke. The increased risks were statistically significant, and the trial was stopped early. In the aftermath, millions of women were left without treatment. Many turned to natural alternatives, including red clover. Suddenly, there was enormous consumer demand. But there was no medical infrastructure to direct that demand appropriately. Red clover had been systematically ignored during the decades when pharmaceutical marketing had dominated the conversation about menopause. There was no prescribing framework, no standardized dosing guidance in clinical guidelines, no pharmaceutical sales force educating doctors. The natural alternative had been available for 6,000 years. The pharmaceutical system had spent 40 years ensuring no one needed to know about it. Then the pharmaceutical solution collapsed, and the natural alternative was still there, still growing in every meadow, still doing exactly what it had always done. Stay until the very end. I'm going to give you practical guidance on how to use it. Red clover for menopausal support has both traditional food-based and supplement-based approaches. Both are valid. They differ in concentration and predictability. Traditional food use, red clover blossoms are edible. They can be eaten fresh in salads, dried for tea, or used as a garnish. This was the traditional European approach, red clover as a dietary component, consumed regularly as part of a varied botanical diet. The isoflavone content in fresh flowers is lower than in concentrated extracts, making this approach suitable for general wellness and prevention rather than acute symptom management. Red clover tea, dried red blossoms steeped in hot water for 10-15 minutes, 2 to 3 cups daily. Mild, slightly sweet, honey-like flavor. This is the traditional European medicinal preparation and provides a moderate dose of isoflavones. Standardized extract. Commercial red clover isoflavone supplements are standardized typically to 40 mg or 80 mg total isoflavones. The clinical trials showing significant results for hot flashes typically used 40, 80 mg of total isoflavones daily. Look for supplements standardized to include all 4 primary isoflavones: biochain A, formononetin, didzane, and genistein. Timing. Isoflavones are most effective when consumed consistently over time. Studies showing significant effects typically ran for 12 weeks or longer. This reflects the phytoestrogen's mechanism. It is modulating a hormonal system, not providing acute pharmacological relief. Important considerations. Women with a history of estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer should consult a healthcare provider before using isoflavone supplements, as the evidence on safety in this population, while generally reassuring, is not fully settled. Women on blood-thinning medications should note that red clover contains coumarin compounds with potential anticoagulant activity. Growing it, red clover is one of the simplest plants to grow. It is available as agricultural seed. It fixes atmospheric nitrogen, improving any soil it grows in. It flowers continuously throughout summer. It is essentially maintenance-free. 6,000 years of use. Multiple clinical trials confirming significant effects on menopausal symptoms. Growing freely in every meadow in the Northern Hemisphere. And millions of women left without treatment in 2002 after the pharmaceutical solution they'd been told was the gold standard turned out to increase their risk of cancer and heart disease, who never heard about it. The meadow was always there. The plant was always there. The knowledge was buried under 40 years of pharmaceutical marketing. If this matters to you, if you believe women deserve to know what grows in their own fields, subscribe. Every week on this channel, the plants they replaced, the science they buried, the remedies that survived. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.